spoke at Summer Strong a couple weeks ago and gave a great talk, basically going back to kind of his roots a little bit with the Poliquin Institute and discussing, different supplement routines for performance, muscle gain, and whatnot. And it was funny because it's things that at least I had always heard, and there were things in there that I had forgotten. I was like, oh, I forgot about, phosphocetyl or what is it?
Choline. Serine or choline?
Yeah, the serine, the one that before sleep, to reduce inflammation. So I mean, there was some cool ones that I just hadn't thought of, and I was like, "Ooh, I forgot about that one." Wrote it down, and was like, "I got to go mess with that."
Well, the one we talked about post presentation is good old fashioned creatine monohydrate.
That
right?
is, yeah.
And and the big thing that people, they didn't realize creatine's been around literally forever. It was I can't remember his name. I think it's Michael something. He was a French chemist that basically was able to separate it in the 1800s. It has been around forever. But the other thing is how creatine monohydrate affects the rate in which a neuron fires through giving it ATP.
Yep.
And what they have discovered, in bad press, it lasts a lot longer than good press, it seems, because people still don't realize that it is brain protective.
It's
it totally is. They were using it for second stage TBI injuries. And to be honest with you, it's I forgot about some of that stuff until I was like, okay, what is my presentation? There are a number of things I think are really important. And I'm like, creatine monohydrate's essential. I talk about that. It doesn't get enough actual real conversation. And it was when I was going over my speaker's notes from a long time ago that I was like, oh, that's right. There's a host of reasons that a lot of these micronutrients and amino acids are used that are really relevant today that I totally forgot about. Because, a lot of times you only ever speak from it on a growth perspective. How do I take this and get bigger and better? How do I take this and get stronger and faster? And then you realize, oh, there's a backside to a lot of these things that people should be using just to be healthier and live longer.
The creatine monohydrate, and I get at least a question a week asking about, and it's so funny, people are like, well, do you cycle on and off it? And my comment is, it's not a fucking steroid. That's like cycling off red and, hey, I'm doing a cycle of red meat. And then what about this? I'm like, I might be one of the longest continuous creatine users on the planet. 1990 was when Zengus gave it to us. And I've taken, 5 grams twice a day since then. And the research is only within the last 10, maybe even just 5 years has come out, the effects within the brain and the neurological, and the neuroprotectant aspect and the ATP. I mean, I said, years ago, and I've said on this podcast ad nauseum, that every vertebrae on this planet should be taking creatine. And, it doesn't matter if you're, a little kid or an adult or whatever. I mean, people are like, oh, supplements for kids. I'm like, I put a little in my kids' stuff all the time. If they're going to put a shake, I always put a little teaspoon in there for them. And it's just smart. And it's just amazing that people are still asking about cycling it and loading it and this. And I'm like, fuck. Yep. Stop overcomplicating. Just put a little bit in your shake in the morning and take a little bit before night and you'll be fine.
Well, and isn't that the truth? So many people are looking for the shortcut, right? How, and obviously that's why anabolics and, growth peptides and all these different things that have come into, basically the public reality recently in regards to peptides are so popular because they think that they're going to shorten the process. And to some degree, I guess you could argue that anything that speeds up restoration potentially shortens the process if you train really hard. So you can go from doing 2 sessions a day, instead of 1, and over the course of 4 years, you do twice as much work. So 2 clones compete. The clone that handles more work does better. There's that whole argument to it. But what people don't realize is that it's still extremely short-sighted in the fact that they put all this energy into the concept of anabolics or peptides or this or that. And it's like, okay, so you're going to shorten your window and maybe get to Jacksville super fast, but your personality still dictates that you're going to be gone in 2 years anyway. Right. And so what I started to realize when I was going through the presentation and how I wanted to present it was that, okay, how do I speak about these things to a group of people that are in this for the long haul? Anabolics are not as irrelevant. How do I speak to people that, you know, are going to be lifting weights 10 years from now, or people that actually give a shit about this? And it's not going to be like a flash in the pan fitness chick who gets lean for 2 years and then vanishes. And so that's when I really decided to get away from like the product side of a supplement, sports supplement talk. And that's when I decided to go, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about micronutrients that you could buy from, I don't care who. You can combine them in products if you want to, but like, why do you take phosphatidylserine? Why is tyrosine so important? Why
or
do
taurine.
Animals that,
I mean,
taurine,
dude, and what's crazy is I have 3 huge bottles of 1,000 milligram taurine pills that were sitting in my in the pantry, and like for some reason I just stopped taking them, and I was like, 4 grams a day, right. And so now, and I was like, let's throw those back in. I got them sitting here, and like that's what I loved about it. It reminded me so much of like, because I think we are constantly like looking like what's the next big thing or what's this, and you forget that like you said, there's this whole micronutrient, and then the other thing, and I always bring this up. Dr. Tom Incledon made this statement to me years ago. He said that if we were to go back in time 100 years, the level of nutrient density and the amount of micronutrients in food was like 10 to 20 fold. He goes, off of the same eating and the same workouts, you would be dramatically in better shape, healthier, and more jacked. He goes, the problem that we're running into is that the food is so depleted of nutrients that like that, 10 ounces of steak 100 years ago was dramatically different than this 10 ounces in these vegetables and this. So now what we're having to do is go back and almost backfill for our basically shitty, low micronutrient, based foods. Dense foods. And it's just not the case. And he's like, the amount of food allergies that people are developing to these foods like didn't exist 100 years ago. Like the fact that, we have people today that, like for me example, gluten in bread and these, I mean, he's like, dude, like nobody had these issues. Like these weren't like, everybody drank milk, everybody had eggs, everybody ate this stuff. And he really goes back. He goes like it was a change in the gut biome and, all these other extraneous factors. But I mean, just being able to go back and say, hey, we know that the food's not as nutrient dense. So these are why these supplements become so important is really like that was the strength of that. Great train and I'm right on track. I'm smoking.